Two women, older, wiser, and impossibly captivating, invited me for drinks one rainy night. And before the evening was over, they told me something I'll never forget. We're the ones you'll remember. It was the kind of evening that seemed designed to pull people indoors. A steady drizzle tapped against the city sidewalks, softening the glow of the street lights into hazy orbs of gold. I ducked into the lounge more to escape the damp air than to look for company. The place had its own warmth, low amber lighting, faint jazz humming from hidden speakers, and the gentle clink of glass against glass. The air carried a blend of citrus zest from cocktails and the darker, oak-heavy scent of red wine. I had barely shrugged the rain from my jacket when I noticed them. Two women, sitting at a small table near the corner, where the shadows made the candlelight seem to bend around them. They weren't loud or flashy the way some groups could be in a place like this. Instead, they carried themselves with the sort of quiet confidence that turns more heads than raised voices ever could. The first caught my eye with her elegance. Her hair swept back, revealing the graceful line of her neck. A silk blouse traced her figure without effort, and when she glanced up from her glass, her eyes held a calm sharpness, like someone who knew how to measure people in a single look. Beside her sat her friend, different in style, but no less striking. Her laughter came easier, warmer, and her curls framed her face in a way that made her seem both approachable and mischievous at the same time. I thought I was imagining it when their gaze settled on me. But then, a small wave, a beckoning gesture, subtle, sure of itself, the kind of invitation that wasn't really a request. For a moment I hesitated, half smiling, unsure if they truly meant me. But then the one with the easy laugh tilted her head and raised her glass slightly, as if to seal the moment. I felt a flicker in my chest, part nerves, part curiosity, and before I knew it, my feet had carried me across the floor to their table. "Sit with us," the elegant one said, her voice smooth, low, and certain. She didn't ask. It was closer to an instruction, yet softened by the curve of her lips as she said it. The other woman slid a chair out with the tip of her heel, and I found myself lowering into it, the warmth of the candle between us casting soft light on their faces. "Caught you staring," the playful one teased, her eyes glimmering. "Only because you looked first," I said before I could stop myself. The words surprised me as much as they did her, but instead of deflecting, she smiled, slow and approving, as if I'd just passed some kind of quiet test. The air around our table felt different now, more deliberate than casual. I realized with a strange certainty that this wasn't just a chance invitation from strangers. It was the beginning of something I hadn't expected when I walked in out of the rain. The stem of the wine glass was cool between my fingers, its surface slick with the faintest mist. One of them, Marissa, the elegant one, had poured for me with the same careful grace she carried in everything she did. Her hand brushed mine as she passed it across the table, and though the touch lasted no more than a second, it left a trace of warmth that didn't fade right away. "First round's on us," she said, her tone calm but certain, like someone accustomed to taking the lead. Beside her, Lena, the one with the easier laugh, leaned in, resting her chin on her hand as though she'd been waiting all evening for this moment. "You don't strike me as a beer kind of guy," she said. I chuckled softly. "What makes you so sure?" "Your eyes," she replied, without hesitation. "You're the type who studies things, not just gulps them down." Her words disarmed me. It wasn't often that anyone noticed such things, or at least said them out loud. The three of us raised our glasses. The toast wasn't formal, just a simple "to tonight." But when the rim of my glass touched theirs, I felt something shift, as if we'd quietly agreed on an unspoken promise that this night wouldn't be wasted. Conversation slipped into place easily after that, like cards being laid down one by one. They spoke of their lives, not the glossy, surface-level anecdotes, but the pieces that revealed more depth. Marissa told me about the years she'd built her career, the battles she fought in a world that often underestimated her. Lena confessed she'd chosen freedom over stability once, and though it scared her, she wouldn't trade it. I listened, drawn not just to the stories themselves, but to the way they told them, without apology, without softening their truths. There was strength in both of them, though it manifested differently. Marissa carried hers like steel hidden beneath silk, while Lena wore hers like fire, untamed and bright. When they turned their attention to me, I felt oddly exposed. "What about you?" Marissa asked, her gaze steady. "What's your story, then?" I hesitated, swirling the wine in my glass. Still writing it, I guess. Still trying to figure out what matters enough to fight for. Lena's smile softened. "That's not a bad place to be, as long as you're honest about it." And for some reason I was. I told them about my half-formed ambitions, about the restless tug I sometimes felt, that quiet fear of not leaving a mark on anyone's life. They didn't laugh or dismiss me the way some might have. They leaned closer, listening as though every word had weight. At one point, Lena shifted her chair, so her knee brushed mine beneath the table. The contact was small, but the message clear. "We're here, we're listening, we see you." The jazz in the background grew softer in my awareness, fading behind the cadence of their voices. The lounge itself seemed to retreat, until it felt as though the three of us existed in a world separate from the rest of the room. And as another round of glasses was poured, I realized I wasn't simply their guest anymore. I was a participant, drawn into their orbit, one sip, one glance at a time. The wine flowed easily, loosening the edges of the evening, but it wasn't the drink that made my chest tighten. It was the way the atmosphere at our table began to change. What started as light conversation and teasing laughter had slipped, almost unnoticed, into something quieter, heavier, more deliberate. Marissa leaned back in her chair, studying me in a way that made me feel like I'd been peeled open. The candlelight carved shadows along her jawline, softening her elegance into something warmer, yet no less commanding. Lena had shifted closer during one of my stories, her arm now resting on the back of my chair, her presence so near that the faintest brush of her sleeve grazed my shoulder when she moved. "So," Marissa began, swirling the last of her wine, "you're young, searching, ambitious. You look at the world like it's waiting for you." The way she said young made my throat tighten. It wasn't cruel, but there was weight in it, a fact I couldn't argue with. I laughed nervously, trying to mask my sudden self-consciousness. Guess that's the polite way of saying, I don't know what I'm doing yet. Lena tilted her head, her curls catching the candlelight. "Or maybe," she said softly, "it's the brave way, to admit you're still becoming." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and maybe to lighten the mood, or maybe because I was afraid of what was stirring inside me, I blurted out the thought that had been lurking in the back of my mind. "Let's be honest," I said, glancing between them. "I'm probably too young for the world you two live in." There it was, the thing I hadn't said until now, the thing I was sure they'd been thinking. For a moment, silence pooled between us. My pulse quickened. Then Marissa's eyes flicked to Lena's, a glance so quick I might have missed it if I weren't watching them both so intently. Something passed between them, something I couldn't name. Marissa leaned forward, setting her glass down with care. "You're exactly where you should be tonight," she said, her voice lower now, almost intimate. The world around us dimmed in that moment. The murmur of other patrons, the clinking of cutlery, even the soft music, all of it seemed to blur into the background. I swallowed, the truth of her words pressing into me. My protest died before it reached my lips. Lena's hand shifted slightly, her fingers brushing the edge of my shoulder, and though the touch was feather-light, it sent a ripple down my spine. She smiled, not playful this time, but softer, steadier. "Don't overthink it. Just be here." And I was. Or at least, I tried to be, even as every nerve in me seemed alive with awareness of their eyes, their nearness, their quiet confidence that drew me in against every doubt I carried. The air felt charged, as though we were balanced on the edge of something unnamed. Not yet spoken, not yet acted upon, but undeniably there, waiting for the next small shift to pull us further in. The table between us seemed to shrink as the night moved forward. Every word, every pause, every glance carried more weight than it had an hour ago. I could feel the shift in the air, not dramatic but subtle, like the way a room changes just before a storm. Marissa was the first to close the distance. As I spoke about my uncertainty, how I often felt restless, as though I was chasing something without knowing what it was, she reached across the table. Her hand rested on my forearm, fingers warm against the fabric of my sleeve. It wasn't a bold gesture, not meant to startle, but something steadier, a quiet anchor. Her touch slowed me. Words that had been tumbling out of me found their rhythm. My voice softened, as though her hand had pulled the edge off my anxiety. "You think you're the only one who's ever felt lost?" she asked gently. Her thumb brushed lightly, absent-mindedly, across my arm, a gesture that sent a small current through me. "We all walk through those years. You just happen to be honest enough to admit it." Lena leaned closer, her chair angled toward mine, until her knee nearly touched me beneath the table. I could feel the faint press of her leg against mine now and then, like a reminder of her presence. Impossible to ignore, but not demanding either. "What keeps you awake at night?" Lena asked. Her tone wasn't teasing anymore. It was serious, searching. I let out a slow breath, staring into my glass. The thought of wasting time, of being forgettable. The confession surprised even me. Saying it aloud made it heavier, more real. My throat tightened, but I didn't look away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena's hand rose, brushing lightly against my forehead. She tucked a stray lock of hair back in place, her fingers lingering just a second longer than necessary. The touch was tender, almost protective, but there was something else in it, something that stirred deeper in my chest. "You won't be forgettable," she said softly, her eyes locked on mine. "Not to the people who matter." The lounge around us might as well have disappeared. I wasn't aware of the music anymore, or the flicker of candles at other tables. All I could feel was their closeness, the warmth of Marissa's hand on my arm, the steady pressure of Lena's knee against mine, the ghost of her touch still tingling across my forehead. I felt exposed in a way I hadn't expected, vulnerable. But instead of recoiling from it, I found myself leaning into it. Their presence didn't make my fears smaller. It made them bearable, like sharing the weight of them somehow made it less crushing. And in that quiet, between their touches and their words, I realized something. They weren't trying to pull me out of my restlessness. They were inviting me to sit in it, to be honest with it, while reminding me I wasn't alone. By the time the third bottle was opened, the laughter had slowed. Not faded, not disappeared, but softened into something quieter, something threaded with meaning. The clinking of glasses had given way to long pauses, where none of us seemed in a hurry to break the silence. Marissa swirled her wine, her gaze fixed on the candle's flicker instead of me. Lena leaned forward, her elbow resting on the table, her cheek propped against her hand. I had the feeling, sudden and sharp, that they were leading me somewhere, that all the stories and teasing and touches had been steps on a path I hadn't realized I was walking. "You're wondering," Marissa said at last, her voice low and steady, "why we asked you here tonight." My pulse quickened. She hadn't looked at me yet, but the weight of her words pinned me to my seat. Lena's lips curved, a softer smile than the one she'd worn earlier, tinged with something vulnerable beneath the warmth. "We didn't invite you just for drinks," she said, her tone gentler now. "We invited you because we wanted you to remember this night, to remember us." The words hung there, suspended, pressing into me with a force I couldn't name. I swallowed, suddenly aware of every small sound in the room. The faint scratch of a chair moving somewhere behind us, the muffled laugh from another table, the soft pulse of jazz filling the spaces between heartbeats. Yet none of it reached me. The only thing that existed in that moment was the two of them, their eyes holding mine with a certainty that made my chest tighten. "You'll remember us," Marissa said finally, her eyes meeting mine now, unwavering. "Not because of what we say tonight, not because of anything grand, but because some people, they don't just pass through your life. They leave something behind." Her words struck something deep, deeper than I was ready for. I tried to speak, tried to joke, or deflect, or lighten the gravity that had suddenly filled the air, but nothing came. My throat was dry, my thoughts too tangled. Instead, I looked at them, at Marissa's elegance, softened now by the vulnerability in her gaze, at Lena's warmth, still glowing but steadier, more fragile than before. I noticed the faint lines at the corners of their eyes, the stories written in their expressions, the way their beauty wasn't trying to be noticed. It simply was. And for the first time that evening, I understood the truth of what was happening. The age between us, the differences in where we stood in life, they weren't barriers. They were what gave the moment its gravity. I don't think I could forget you if I tried. I whispered, the words slipping out before I could hold them back. Lena's hand found mine on the table, her fingers curling around my own with quiet certainty. Marissa leaned in slightly, her eyes softening. And in that silence, in their closeness, I realized this wasn't a casual evening anymore. This was a memory being carved into me, one I knew would last. After their words, "You'll remember us," the silence didn't feel empty. It felt alive, stretched like a string pulled taut between us. My heart thudded in my chest, not in panic, but in a kind of wonder, as though I was standing on the edge of something I didn't yet know how to name. Lena was the first to move. Her hand, already resting lightly on mine, gave a slow squeeze, not rushed, not fleeting. Her thumb brushed the ridge of my knuckle, a small motion that anchored me in the present. Marissa, across from me, leaned forward. She didn't touch me at first, only studied me with a gaze that felt searching, almost protective. Then, with a quiet certainty, she slid her hand across the table until it rested beside Lena's, her fingertips grazing the back of my wrist. 2 points of warmth, 2 different kinds of presence, both steady, both grounding. For a long moment, we simply stayed like that, the three of us connected by a tangle of hands, the soft glow of the candlelight, making everything feel impossibly intimate. "You don't have to understand tonight," Marissa said softly, her voice low and even. "You only have to feel it." Her words settled into me, loosening the knots of hesitation I'd been carrying since the evening began. Lena shifted closer then, her chair angled toward mine until her shoulder brushed against me. She tilted her head, resting it lightly against my arm, her curls brushing the fabric of my shirt. The faint warmth of her cheeks seeped through, steadying the restless beat of my heart. The world around us blurred. Conversations at nearby tables faded into meaningless background noise. Even the music seemed distant, as if it were playing somewhere far away, muffled by the closeness of this small circle we'd created. I turned my hand under Lena's, intertwining my fingers with hers, and she let out a quiet breath, a sound almost like relief. At the same time, Marissa's hand slid a fraction further, her fingertips pressing more firmly against my wrist, deliberate and sure, as if to remind me she was there too, equally present, equally part of this moment. I looked between them, at the contrast that somehow fit so perfectly. Lena's warmth and openness, Marissa's calm intensity. 2 different lights, and yet, together, they illuminated something I hadn't known I was missing. "We don't want promises," Lena murmured, her voice muffled slightly against my arm. "Not plans, not expectations. Just this." Her words echoed exactly what I was feeling, but hadn't been able to name. This wasn't about tomorrow or next week. It wasn't about the strangeness of the age gap or what people outside this lounge might think. It was about right now. The way their nearness made me feel seen, chosen, held in a way that demanded nothing but presence. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My chest loosened, my doubts quieted, and in that circle, our hands entwined, her head against my arm, Marissa's steady touch grounding me. I knew something rare was happening, something I would carry long after the night ended. It wasn't passion alone. It wasn't curiosity. It was a connection, equal, unexpected, unforgettable. By the time we stepped outside, the rain had thinned into a mist, the kind that clung lightly to skin and made the streetlights shimmer in blurred halos. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of wet pavement and blooming jasmine from somewhere nearby. I pulled in a deep breath, half to steady myself, half because I wanted to mark the moment, to hold on to the way everything felt suspended. We stood just outside the lounge doors, the hum of the city softened by the hour. Marissa drew her coat tighter around her shoulders, her elegance unchanged even in the drizzle. Lena tilted her face toward the sky for a moment, letting the mist touch her curls, then shook her head with a soft laugh. There was no rush to leave, no frantic searching for what to say next. The silence between us now wasn't awkward. It was full, thick with everything that had already been spoken and everything that didn't need to be. Marissa turned to me first. Without a word, she stepped close, her arms slipping around my shoulders in a slow, deliberate embrace. I felt the cool edge of her coat against me, but beneath it, the warmth of her body. Her cheek pressed lightly to mine, her breath warm as she whispered, "Don't overthink it. Just remember." When she pulled back, Lena was already moving forward. She wrapped her arms around my waist, holding me with a gentleness that was somehow both light and grounding. Her cheek rested against my chest, and for a moment I felt the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat through the thin layers between us. She tilted her head slightly, and her lips brushed my cheek in a soft, fleeting kiss that sent a ripple of warmth through me. As she stepped back, the two of them exchanged a look one I had seen throughout the night, unspoken, seamless, the kind of glance that only comes from years of knowing one another. Then, together, they turned their eyes back to me. Almost in unison, their voices blended, low and certain. "We told you. You'll remember us." And just like that, I knew they were right. I watched as they walked away arm in arm, their figures slowly fading into the golden haze of the streetlight, the mist catching in their hair and coats until they looked like something almost unreal. I wanted to call out, to ask for more, for tomorrow, for another night, for anything that might extend what we'd shared. But I didn't, because they had given me what they intended, and it was enough. I stood there long after they disappeared, the echo of their touch still warm on my skin, their words replaying in my mind. The city carried on around me, cars hissing across the damp road, distant voices weaving in and out of earshot. But none of it mattered. What mattered was that they were right. I would remember them, not as a fleeting encounter, not as strangers from a rainy night, but as two women who had left a mark I hadn't known I was waiting for. And even as I finally began to walk home, I carried the strange, certain comfort that some memories don't fade. They live, quietly, in the space between your heartbeat and your breath.